Hey, what's up, guys? I'm recording this in my son's room, who's out of town because my other son is sick in the other room and hopefully asleep, but we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can, but of course, Coleridge is a huge deal, and I know you know that because we all know that. That's a joke for me. To begin with, just because we always start here, some of you like to kind of be positioned this way. Coleridge's dates. He's born in 1772, very close to an auspicious year, and then he dies in 1834. If you're doing some of that quick math, he doesn't die young by any stretch, but it's not the longest run either. And we'll talk about why here in a minute. He's described by a guy named Charles Lamb, who is actually buddies with Charles Lamb. We will not read because he's a critic, which means he wrote essays. You guys would riot. Anyway, he's described by Charles Lamb as lonely, learned, and eloquent. I've mentioned previously, and I'll touch upon it here, that he was best friends with Wordsworth. Partners is a more accurate term. They published lyrical ballads together, which is not a super common thing to do, publish a book of poems together. Most of the poems were Wordsworth, but a few of them were Coleridge, and the really famous one is called Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Your sub, whoever that may be, has probably heard of it, even though you haven't. It's a big deal. That one's in there. That's Coleridge. A little bit about his life. He had turbulent early years, which I'm not going to really get into. He leaves Cambridge without a degree. And that happens, but in this day and age, the kind of guy he was, it's early in his career, it's a bit of a mark against him, basically. When meeting Wordsworth, this is a direct quotation, he decided that Wordsworth was, quote, the best poet of the age. That's when they met. So he thought pretty highly of the guy. He follows him around. When I say they're partners, I think I touched upon this when we talked about Wordsworth. They worked intensely together, trading poems, critiquing each other, offering advice. You'll see phrases and for sure ideas sort of repeated in Wordsworth and or Coleridge. They bounce back and forth. So it's kind of interesting to have this weird dynamic at the turn of the century where these two, like, honestly, like literary, they both end up being huge, work together too. Like it's a pretty uncommon thing. My notes are weird. Hang on. So at one point in there, Coleridge's whole life is crazy. Wordsworth has some hard times, like will happen to anyone in their lives. Coleridge's entire life could be a movie. It's pretty rough. At one point, he marries a woman out of a feeling of duty. And to cut through that story really quickly, you can look it up. It's famous. He wants to set up like a religious utopia. I think it's religious. It's definitely a utopia in America, because it's that, time in the world. And to set up that utopia, you need families. So he kind of gets set up with this woman that he's going to move away with and start a family. Spoilers, the utopia, the money behind it falls through. It doesn't work out. So the plan's off, but he's already weirdly betrothed to this woman. So he marries her, and it's not a happy marriage. The statistic I saw somewhere, like the count, he's married to her for decades, but they only spend like 6 years together collectively or something. Not great. Anyway, that's another hardship upon him. He falls in love with another woman at one point. That love, by all accounts, is unrequited, which means unreturned. They're really good friends. He gets friend zoned by the woman. Whoops. And of course, he's still married at the time, so who's to say he would have done anything? But the point is, everywhere he turns, Coleridge runs into heartache, I suppose. Let me see. Oh, I should mention here, this is the big thing of... Sorry about that. My son's fine. That was a cat fight. Okay. The super famous thing about Coleridge, other than his poems, he was an opium addict. Again, to give you the short, hopefully G-rated version of that, it's entirely similar to sort of opioid issues we have now. If any of you know even a little bit about that, he struggled with all kinds of painful ailments from a young age. He discovered a pretty common drug at the time was like an opium prescription, if you like. And taking that, he even remarked upon, I have a great quotation actually, summed it up as, Coleridge soon recognized that the drug was a greater evil than the diseases it did not cure. And that last part especially, like, you're taking it because you're in so much pain, and it's ruining you, and also it's not really helping. Yeah. And again, that's kind of Coleridge to a T. One of the first poems might be the first poem in the packet. I don't have it in front of me just now, but it's in our packet, Dejection, an ode. I know we know what an ode is at this point, at least I hope we do. But dejection is like out and out belief that you're a failure, ultimate depression. He writes an ode to it, just to give you an idea of sort of his headspace. Anyway, the deal with being an opium addict, the reason I bring it up, many of his poems are fragmentary, are unfinished. This is because he would get going and he'd have a cool idea and he'd work on it, and then just all enthusiasm, all momentum would just kind of cease, and that would be the end of it. And a lot of really cool stuff, some of them really famous actually, they're just not done. So they still get studied. I don't remember if I've assigned any fragments. I'll have to check, sorry. But if you read Coleridge after this class, which is also what I'm trying to prepare you for, you will definitely encounter like Kubla Khan, stuff like that. He wrote an epic called Rime of the Ancient Mariner. He tried to write an epic about vampires that went unfinished, and I want to say it, I read it years ago, it ends like right when it kind of starts to get interesting. You're like, oh, this weird vampires, and then it just stops. You're like, oh, that's kind of Coleridge. Anyway, despite all that, he is today, and even in his own time, seen as a literary and intellectual hero. In his later years, and they came on really quickly, he aged really fast as a result of the ailments, but let's be real, also the opium. He was debilitated physically. He lived with people by the end of his life to kind of help take care of him. And sort of intellectuals, scholars, poets, all these people, artists, would come from all over Europe to his house in England to sit and talk with him. Like, he was that well regarded, and still that sharp, like still an amazing mind. Somewhere in here, he wrote a thing called the Biographia Literaria, which I would not assign to you. It's a literary encyclopedia, kind of. And it's really good, and it's kind of an autobiography, too. But you would hate it. But it's amazing. It's his thoughts on poems. It's his thoughts on poets. It's his thoughts on art. And people sort of took it as gospel in a way. Just, again, to give you an idea of his position in the canon. Anything else I want you to know? There's one more quotation about his later years I wanted to... Okay, so this is how he's thought of now, and I couldn't put it better, so I'm just going to read it at you. One of his major legacies is the notion that culture, the nation's artistic and spiritual heritage, represents a force with the power to combat the fragmentation of a modern, market-driven society and to restore a common collective life. I know some of you, your eyes glazed over when I said that. I'll end with this. It's the market-driven life, the everyday. This should ring a lot of bells if you've paid any attention to our discussion of Wordsworth, especially, the world is too much with us, right? The sort of bending to consumer culture in Wordsworth's sonnet. He essentially argues that that's become a god unto itself, the worship of things, buying them and selling them and making money, and how gross that is, and how we're losing something really important in that trade. Coleridge does a similar thing. He's gonna do it in oftentimes a sadder way. I would almost liken it to, like, it's just different flavors. Granted, I'm generalizing. They are more different than that, but Coleridge is a bitter pill, whereas Wordsworth is really happy a lot of the time, like always talking about flowers and trees and stuff. Coleridge will do that, but another poem in the packet, for instance, that you have, My Lime Tree Bower, My Prison, is all about how he's sitting under a tree because he's injured and he can't go on this walk with his friends. Charles Lamb, I think, is actually in that poem. And he's thinking about how awesome it must be. Like he sees a hawk or something, and he's like, because his friends aren't like super far away. He's like, oh, I bet my buddy sees that hawk. I bet it's really amazing because like he's just in the natural world. He's surrounded by all these really cool things. And it's nice because he's hopeful for his friend, right? But in the background of all of that is the knowledge that he's not there and he's missing out. So yeah, again, if you got Wordsworth at all, you can get through Coleridge. You can make sense of it, like, but it's fairly consistently a bummer. So sorry about that. Anyway, I will definitely be back Monday. I hope, and I hope you guys do well. Please don't forget about the homework. Please don't forget about the revision. That's all I got. Thanks.